Councillor Huang, as it is your motion, would you like to speak on it?
Of course, Mr. Mayor. But before I speak, I'd like to put up a video that I have previously submitted.
Hello councillors of the Cumberland City Council. My name is Craig Foster and I'm involved in the Racism Not Welcome campaign. I'm delighted that Councillor Kun Huang has put forward the notice of motion this evening for you all to support the Racism Not Welcome campaign and join a growing list of LGAs around the country who are saying that racism is not welcome in our local communities. That includes, of course, the Inner West Council, Waverley Council and only in the last couple of weeks the City of Sydney. It's a movement that's growing because prejudice and bigotry is growing around the country. All the prevalent research, including the Social Cohesion Index from the Scanlon Foundation in Melbourne, says that particularly Asian Australians, but also African Australians and our Australian Muslim community are experiencing more prejudice, bigotry and racism than in recent years. We need to take action again. In fact, Kun has very bravely shared the vicious, disgusting racial vilification correspondence that he recently received, like several other councillors we know, both in Sydney and around Australia, who likewise received similar correspondence. But in doing so, we had to think long and hard about whether to make that public. And that's just the thin edge of the wedge, because if a councillor like Kun has to think about whether to share publicly the vilification that he's received, how many people in our communities are receiving likewise? How many people are being racially vilified and don't have the power or the social capital or the political position like Kun to be able to get that out into the media landscape? So it's very important that we support all of those people here in Auburn and around your Cumberland City Council who are experiencing this every day. We know it's happening, we have to talk about it, we have to acknowledge it, and we have to attack it. How are we going to do that? The Racism Not Welcome street signs are going up in LGAs around the country in order to make a public, visible, positive commitment to say that racism is not welcome within your city council. This also serves to start the necessary and important conversations that we haven't been having. This says that racism exists, it says it exists for too many people in your LGA, and it allows them an opportunity to talk about what they've been experiencing. That's the first point. Once we then validate that lived experience, we're then able to supply people with the tools to overcome and eradicate this horrible part of human life. Let's do so. Racism Not Welcome motion. Thank you to Kun for putting that forward. Thank you to all the councillors there and the Mayor for your support, and I would be delighted to see and to say publicly that Cumberland City Council is part of the Racism Not Welcome movement. Well done all.
Just before I speak, I'd like to add a point 5 to the motion, that the council allocate $5,000 towards the Racism Not Welcome campaign. Yep, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I would like to thank all the public forum speakers who were here tonight. They all spoke passionately about their own experience and the poisonous nature of racism. Mr. Mayor, councillors, racism is both hurtful and enraging. It robs you of your dignity and denies the equality that all human beings rightfully have. I know it all too well from my own personal experience. I wasn't born in Australia. My family arrived here in 1999. My parents choose to call Australia home because they want a better life for me, just like many other migrant families. I can still clearly remember the first time I encountered racism. You never forget it. I was a 9-year-old boy, barely speak any English at all. I was told to go back to your boat. And the people made fun of my surname simply because they couldn't pronounce it. I still remember the days when I went to the local pizza shop as a teenager, where a random stranger on the street would shout at me and call me a Ching Chong Chinaman. Racism erodes away the social fabric that fundamentally make our nation strong and prosper. It weakens our society, and worst of all, it divides us. Australians against Australians, neighbours against neighbours. I grew up in the Shire and saw what happened with the Canala riot.
Moved Councillor Saha, seconded Deputy Mayor Sarkis. All those in favour? Anyone against?
Mr Mayor,
you.
just before I continue my speech, can I please have the time on hold? I do remember previously when I think yourself and Councillor, I think it was yourself who actually put up a video prior to your speaking or prior to the motion. The time wasn't counted.
Councillor Huang, first and foremost, I don't speak. I'm tied to the chair. Secondly, you took carriage of the motion and you elected straight away to proceed with the video.
That's fine.
Thank you.
If you're going to cut me short, I'm happy to continue my speech. Look, councillors, I grew up in the Shire and saw what happened with Canala riot. I still remember hearing the police siren from 8 o'clock in the morning right into the late hours of the night. I remember my great Australian high school teacher telling the classroom that she was so worried for her and her family that she needed to buy a wig before she walked out the street. I wish racism was a relic of the past, but sadly it's not. It is still here with us today. Over the past 12 months, there has been an alarming increase in reports of racial abuse and violence against Asian Australians. A study from the ANU at the end of last year found that 84.5% of Asian Australians experienced at least one incident of discrimination between January and October last year. A separate report released by the Law Institute showed that 1 in 5 Chinese Australians has experienced racism over the past 12 months.
Huang. Thank you. Councillor Saha, as the seconder, would you like to say a few words? You are the seconder of the motion, are you not?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and I do accept point 5. But before I speak, is there anyone else when I speak? Mr.
You
Mayor?
are the seconder.
So I can speak
I've got
later.
no
right?
one. I've got no one else in queue.
You have no one? Okay, then.
Not at the moment.
Mr. Mayor and councillors, as we celebrate our rich culture, history and knowledge of our first people, we have also reflected on how we can respond to the injustice they experienced. For Australians, for us, there is urgency to address the reduced life expectancy of Indigenous people, their increased likelihood of experiencing poor health, poverty, a lower standard of education, and death in custody. Although we have improved in many of these areas, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians continue to face discrimination on both an institutional and interpersonal level today, Mr. Mayor and councillors. But now, it's not only the Indigenous Australian who face discrimination in our country. We have heard, we have seen in recent days, we have seen a disturbing increase in racism directed at people of Asian background since the start of COVID-19 pandemic. There are many ways, both explicit and implicit, in which we separate and treat those who in one context or another are regarded as other, not included. We should not tolerate racism. We all have a responsibility to do our part in calling it out. Doing so is about living our values of respect, integrity, diversity and inclusion, not to mention courage. Our community must always be one where everyone can feel safe and be assured they are treated with equal dignity. Now, more than ever, we must remember our mission and our purpose, whether it is through our statements, our action, or our other contributions to the society. The Council has an important role to play in shaping public progress. For those who thinks there is no racism in Cumberland City Council, let me tell you that unfortunately it does exist. It occurs when people look at me differently and comment on my appearance. It occurs when people call me Sri Lankan refugees, Kari people. It occurs when one of my Muslim sisters living in Cumberland Council receives threatening calls and messages just for sharing her views publicly. It occurs when I was called the love child of Bart Newton and Kamal in this chamber, Mr. Mayor and councillors. Will the street blades and sign change all of this? The answer is no, but it will be a start. It will send a message to the people that racism is not welcome at Cumberland. To the wider New South Wales community, they will know that we will not tolerate injustice. The world will know that we believe in equality and inclusivity now and moving forward. We should aim to create a community where cultural diversity is understood, accepted, and celebrated as a powerful asset to achieving our mission, Mr. Mayor, welcome, belong, succeed. And to influence thinking within Cumberland Council and beyond the boundaries of Cumberland City Council. It is important that we commit to ourselves and to the community by endorsing and accepting Racism Not Welcome campaign in Cumberland City. I want to thank everyone who has participated, supported, and accepted Racism Not Welcome campaign, especially Craig Foster, and also commend Inner West Council to taking a lead on this. To my colleague and other members of our community who have experienced racism, we recognize your pain. We stand with you in solidarity. And my message to you, please do not remain silent, call it out. Mr. Mayor and councillors, I am not asking you to make a strong public statement.
Extension of time. Moved Councillor Atty, seconded Councillor Sarkis. All those in favour? Anyone against? Please proceed, Councillor Saha.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor and councillors, I'm not asking you to make a strong public statement. I'm requesting all of you to stand with our first people, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians, the Chinese Australian community, the culturally, linguistically diverse community, and those who have done everything they could to stop racism. Please support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Saha. Councillor Cummings. So Councillor Campbell, we have Councillor Cummings, then yourself at the moment.
Okay.
Councillor Huang, your buttons, please. No.
I have a question to you through you to the governance officer. On the 2nd of December, Councillor Garrard and Councillor Sarkis moved an urgency motion, and in that time they also played a video of them visiting the grave of Arthur Todd Holroyd. I'm just wondering whether the video at the time was calculated in the speech.
Well, we can take.
Just a correction on that. I never attended the cemetery and never attended the grave of Arthur Todd Holroyd.
Look,
Okay, thanks.
I'm happy to take it on notice, Mr. Ayub. It's a question that we can't possibly recall. Whether the matter of urgency was put up for the grave, when Holroyd's grave was neglected and you kindly fixed it up, whether the notice of urgency the video played ran into your speaking time. So, I'm happy to take it on notice. Thank you, Councillor Huang.
Mr. Mayor, I'm surprised you can't remember, because I can, and the answer is that didn't go into Councillor Garrard's time.
Councillor Hamid, given the amount of technical issues you seem to have with your Zoom, we'll just proceed. Councillor, okay, let's move on. Councillor Cummings, you had the call.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I am quite disturbed on what was sent to Councillor Wong, but also likewise yourself, I know, and the Deputy Mayor have also received similar sort of intimidating threats, and other councillors. And I know that a large blame is because cowards can hide behind social media. That's one of the problems in this society today, is it's too easy to make allegations and threaten people without having the courage of facing them and looking them in the eye. But I'll go back, and as Councillor Garrard likes to bring up Holroyd facts, I, on the 15th of April 2014, moved a motion that Holroyd supports racism, it stops with me campaign. And that was mainly through the AFL player Adam Good being racially vilified, even though he had received Australian of the Year. Now, we can all go on about race and being vilified, but I found it astounding that in this country, the person who receives the highest honour that year can be vilified in such a way, purely because of his colour, purely because he's an Aborigine. And I thank Councillor Suman Sahar for mentioning our First Nations people, because they are, in this country, the most disadvantaged. They have the highest infant mortality rate, one of the highest in the world. They have the shortest life expectancy of a race in this world. They have the highest incarceration rate of any group in Australia. And that's a shameful place for Australia to be in. I think, and to think, nearly 30 years since the 1991 Royal Commission into the death in custody of Aboriginal people, and nothing has been done. 434 deaths recorded, and I think it's probably well past that, and just the last week, 3 more deaths in custody, 1 in Victoria and 2 in New South Wales. And where is the mainstream media? Nothing. I know there's other issues, but surely our First Nation people who are dying in droves, who are being incarcerated, who their infants are dying early, and who the seniors have a 10 to 15 years shorter life expectancy, it's a shameful place to be. I don't know what these signs will do. I don't know whether they'll have an effect. But if it drags the spotlight on where we should have started, we're making it a better place for our First Nations people, and then the newer migrants, they had no choice who could come to this country. They had to wear what was rammed down their throats. So I'm willing to vote for this to see where it goes, and I hope it starts an effect and it doesn't die out like racism stops with me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cummings. Any other speakers speaking on this issue?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Campbell.
Mr. Mayor, it's one of the fundamental responsibilities of Council to build a cohesive, inclusive community which values all of its members without any discrimination on the grounds of race or other perceived differences. Auburn Council had a very good tradition of working, dedicated work to uphold our values, and Auburn Council's motto was many cultures, one community, a very proud motto. Cumberland Council has continued this tradition, and I acknowledge that Holroyd also had made contributions against racism. It's very sad that history shows us that bigotry can be fostered by political opportunists. The disgusting actions that we saw in that letter that received by our colleague, Councillor Huang, they are consequences of a political environment that some unscrupulous people cultivate in this country and elsewhere. And that gives people the feeling that there is a consensus moving in that direction. People may be tempted to express racist views because they feel that people in positions of influence seem to be okaying it. And thus the need for a campaign like this to assert our values publicly, to let the community know what our values are, and to encourage other people to adopt those values. So for those reasons, I endorse this campaign.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Deputy Mayor Sarkis.
Mr Mayor, I'll say that I listened to different points of view that have been put forward tonight. And for somebody who was born and bred in this country, educated, was a cadet growing up, and did everything I did as a young Australian, yes, I was treated at times not the same as other kids. But I look at the slogan, racism not welcome, and just having the word racism there and having the word not there, for me, doesn't cut it. I look at words like welcome, belong, succeed, which aims to do the same, using positive words, a positive vibe. And I think that works a lot better than a slogan that says racism not welcome. But belong, welcome, succeed, these words are inclusive words. They're encouraging words. And although I can appreciate the sentiments and the goal that's trying to be achieved here, I don't agree with using those particular words. I think we should be using more encouraging words, more inclusive words, more belonging words, more words of togetherness rather than words of separation or segregation, or, dare I say, words that, I won't say encourage racism, but the fact that you keep running that word gets it into people's heads. And I think that'll act. There have been studies, Mr. Mayor, I can't pull them, I've been trying to find them now, but my computer skills, I guess, aren't as good as some others. But there have been studies done that show that when you keep using a word and repeating that word, people relate to that word. And that first word is racism. And it doesn't cut it for me. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Excuse me, people in the gallery, I'm going to say this Deputy Mayor Sarkis, can you not commute with the gallery? I'm going to kindly ask if members of the gallery continue to interject, they will be asked to leave. We're trying to debate a meeting here. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Garrard, followed by Councillor Ati.
Mr. Mayor, I would oppose the motion tonight, not because I'm a racist, because I believe that this resolution in no way does justice to the community we live in. I'm not a racist, and I'm certain anyone around this table falls into the same category. You know, at the last meeting, I remember saying some comment like, you know, there's no such thing as race, only human race. And I stick by those comments. I can understand Councillor Kwan's concern and I would say frustration and probably bitterness through the letter that he received, the correspondence he received. I read that and it was absolutely disgusting. And, you know, I can't imagine the type of individual that would write something like that. things do happen to you in public life, unfortunately, and that is where the ugliness of our community sometimes raises its head. In the same fashion, when I was Councillor Kwong's age, I had my house firebombed, totally destroyed. Those sort of things, I suppose, with a family do worry you about public life, and the public then and the public now have comments about that type of behaviour. But that type of behaviour I don't think is normal. I mean, it's not the norm in our community to accept it. But racism within Cumberland, if we want to pursue this word, and I support the comment made by the deputy, that it's a terrible word. And I really don't want to see it in any fashion or form. In our community of Cumberland, we have something like 112,000 people that were born overseas. When you take into account their children that are first generations Australian, we can imagine that we have, tens of thousands of people that are related to communities overseas. And to my understanding, that in the city of Cumberland, things do move rather smoothly. I think there's a uniqueness about our way of life in Cumberland. We go to the local police, both the Cumberland Command and the Auburn Command, and what do we hear? We find out that there's been no complaints at all about bias, racism or bias-related behaviour. In fact, the word from the Auburn Command was simply zero. From the Cumberland Command, that takes in the other half of this city, exactly nil. So I understand, of course, those people who want to make a statement against racism, but I also believe that because of around the community at the moment, there's a great emphasis on domestic violence, and there has been for some time. And I can appreciate how how Australia, New South Wales, and Sydney have really knuckled down to domestic violence, and we see that very much in our sporting arena and how that's been promoted against domestic violence, and more recently abuse against women in the marches that happened a day or two ago. Those things, as far as I'm concerned, take precedence. Racism, I don't believe that we need to have signs around town telling people that we're against racism. It's very much a motherhood resolution tonight. Do you walk down the road or do you walk on the footpath? Do you drive on the left-hand side of the road? Yes, you do. And the majority, the great majority, the massive majority of people don't want racism. Don't want it. But we don't need to promote the word through signage through the city. That's my opinion.
Moved Councillor Saha, seconded Councillor Atty. All those in favour? Aye. Anyone against?
No, I won't say any more, Bob. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garrett. Councillor Atty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, a lot of what I was about to say has actually been stated by Councillor Sarkis and Councillor Garrett. I mean, apart from maybe three or four, well, there's four people in this chamber out of the councillors. I've spent more than half a century in this LGA. Yes, born of immigrant parents who came out in the beginning of 1970. I was actually, technically speaking, made overseas, but I was born here. So I'm part overseas made and manufactured over there, and then I suppose finished off in Sydney.
No warranty.
No, warranty's still there. But Mr. Mayor, I had a couple of questions with some legal people this morning when I was in the city, and I just brought this matter ahead of them, and they said, the mere fact that you actually state that we do not welcome something in this area is actually inciting the matter that you're actually not welcoming in this area. And that is where the issue is, and I believe Councillor Garrard tried to state what that is. We are a very inclusive community, very inclusive. I don't believe anyone lives half their life on the streets as much as I do in this chamber. I'm on the road every single day for at least 4 to 6 hours in my electorate, in my ward, and in other wards as well. And councillors have known this, because I tend to ring up and say, I saw this over in Lane Street over in Whitworthville, and I saw this over in Greystanes, and I saw this over, etc. I do get some flack from other councillors. What are you doing in my ward? It is not your ward. It is everyone's ward. It is everyone's council, everyone's LGA. We are an inclusive group. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, yes, growing up, when maybe we were kids, where I suppose the shift of balance was more towards people born in this country rather than people born outside this country. And to clarify that as well, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Garrard, it's actually 52.2% of this LGA is born overseas, which makes it close to 130,000 people, not 102. I have not seen anything that brings anything close to racism for the good part of 20 years, Mr. Mayor. I've not seen anything. I am inclusive with everyone. I received a message on my phone 3 days ago from also a constituent who I tend to see at least 3 times a week, who said, please, you need to support this racism matter because we, as Muslims in this community, a minority group, are being shunned upon. Mr. Mayor, I responded back to this gentleman and I said to him, well, with great respects, the Muslim community in this LGA is 25%. You're nowhere near a minority group. There is no racism issue. It's an issue with respect of putting a matter up that will eventually incite the very fabric of what he's actually trying not to do. And that is where the problem is with this motion. Again, welcome belongs to seed, which I'm okay with. I prefer many cultures, one community, which we used to have in the eastern seaside. However, Mr. Mayor, the more you speak about something, what happened to domestic violence? The more you speak about something, what happened to the fight against women and the atrocities women go through? The more you speak about something that is not there, the more it will happen. It's not the other way around. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Atty. Councillor Lake.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I guess I'm interested in going for a walk around Cumberland Council with Councillor Atty and having him show me this so-called utopian paradise. It doesn't exist. We all live in a reality, and this council is no different from any other Sydney area. Of course racism exists in Cumberland Council. Of course it exists throughout the Sydney metropolitan area, throughout New South Wales and the country of Australia. We need to acknowledge that. And Councillor Sarkis is concerned about negative messaging. He doesn't like the word racism, he doesn't like the word not, he wants positive messaging. But there can't be any more positive statement than a clear statement that excludes poor behaviour. And that's all that this is. Racism not welcome is a clear statement saying we don't want this poor behaviour to foster in our neighbourhood. It is exactly the same as the posters that we put around Cumberland Council area about 12 months ago, still around Wentworthville, very positive posters that say Cumberland says no to domestic violence. Are you suggesting, Councillor Atty, that by putting up such a poster we would be encouraging domestic violence? I don't think so. It's a clear statement of poor behaviour that we are calling out and seeking to exclude, because we are leaders here. And leadership involves some measure of responsibility and acceptance for problems. And so from Councillor Garrard's view about hiding away terrible words like racism as if they don't exist, burying the problem as if it's not really there, that's not leadership. And like the Women for Justice March, the Say No to Domestic Violence campaign, racism not welcome is another sign of leadership, a clear statement to exclude behaviour that we find abhorrent. So I urge you all to reconsider the comments that you've made tonight. I think there's nothing negative about this message. I think it's a message of hope, and we should support it.
Any other comments on this, councillors? No comments? Okay, I'm about to put the motion. Yeah, right of reply. That's what I mean. Like, you're going to get your right of reply, Councillor Huang.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, councillors. I thank all the councillors for their contribution. Particularly, I want to thank Councillor Cumming for raising the issue of Indigenous Australians, and I concur with him. There is a huge issue in the Indigenous Australian community. I'm happy to work with him and bring that issue into the spotlight after this. And Councillor Lake basically did my reply for me. In response to Councillor Sarkis, Councillor Garrett and Councillor Addy's concern about, raising negative words, I just found a sign that says, ending the silent, stop domestic violence in Cumberland. And Mayor is happily, holding the sign with 2 police officers just outside the council chamber. If, according to Councillor Garrett and Councillor Sarkis' logic, that if you put up words like racism, anti-racism, it will encourage people to be a racist. So if that logic applies, putting signs says stop domestic violence, will that actually increase domestic violence in our area? Is that the logic here? Come on, councillors. Look, Councillor Garrett deplored the letter. Look, over the past few weeks, I have received hundreds and hundreds of emails and phone calls from people across the country. They call me to show their support and deploring the disgraceful attack. I thank every single one of them for reaching out. But my question is that enough? That doesn't stop racism. That doesn't stop that racism will happen to anyone else 2 weeks later or 2 months later. Are we going to start, condoning racism again? We need to actually take action. I know this is a small step, but it's a simple step for council to provide leadership on this issue. This morning, the New South Wales Upper House endorsed this campaign without debate. You have people from the Labor Party, you have people from the Liberal Party, you have people from the Nationals, the Animal Justice, Shooters and Fishers, Christian Democrats, and guess what? Even One Nation supports this campaign.
Yes, Councillor Garrett.
I don't mind listening to what happened in Parliament this morning. I can do that on the podcast. But this is only supposed to
address what's being debated.
I just in case Councillor Garrett missed the information, I just want to provide him with a simple update, that's all.
Well, you can't do that, Councillor Huang. You've got to stick to what's being debated, thank you.
Well, Mr. Mayor, there's a lot of things that you have done in the past that we are not supposed to do, but anyway. Look, councillors, I think ultimately the community will be looking towards us to provide leadership on this issue, and they are watching. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. The motion's now put. I think we'll go straight to the hands. All those in favour of Councillor Huang's motion, can you please raise your hands? Councillor Elmore, Councillor Saha, Councillor Huang, Councillor Cummings, Councillor Lake, Councillor Ahmed and Councillor Campbell. All those against? Councillor Atty, Councillor Zaitar, Councillor Rami, Councillor Sarkis, Councillor Garrard, Councillor Christou and Councillor Zraker. I believe we have a casting vote. I have not changed my position. The motion is defeated. Thank you. Matter of urgency.
That's a
Councillor
shame,
Atty.
Mr Mayor. That's a shame.
We have a matter. Sorry? Thank you. Let's move on.